Hi, Carrie. I feel so privileged to have you on this call with me because there is so much stuff that I have felt really inspired by that I've seen about you and your work that you've been doing recently. And so I feel thrilled to have this conversation. And I just love
Yeah,
the
thank
energy,
you. No, it's great seeing you again after so long.
Beautiful, amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you've been doing so much beautiful work in the realm of organizational psychology and the really important themes and topics, especially in the past couple of years around organizational well-being and resilience, and all of this stuff really resonates with me. And particularly as I'm doing this research around burnout, I'm just really curious to see what your perspectives are and where we can perhaps find some answers on this call today. So thank you so much for
Yeah,
joining.
sure, no problem whatsoever. I look forward to
Awesome.
it.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I would love to start by actually you perhaps expressing like what is the hardest thing for you right now? What are you really excited about perhaps this year that's been really top of your mind?
Okay, well, I think this year is an interesting year
Mm,
given the pandemic. And actually, funny enough, the pandemic, in my view, is the big reset button for
mm,
the whole of our lives. Because first of all, most people have been locked away in their homes, no matter which country you're in
yeah.
now. I haven't been to the university in 8 months.
Ooh.
And the reason, of course, is because, we have to teach remotely. The students are being taught substantially remotely, but from time to time we have face-to-face, but
Mm,
primarily working almost exclusively from home for the last 8 months. And so have lots of
mm,
people all over the globe. Okay, so what has that done? It's made us think about flexible working.
mhm.
Because if we're talking about organizational well-being, how do we create a well-being culture in an organization? Public
Yeah.
sector or private sector, doesn't make any difference which. A part of that is people wanting to have autonomy and control over their job.
Mm,
Well, there's no better way to have autonomy and control but working flexibly.
yep.
So pre-COVID, I published a book called Flexible Work.
Mhm.
And in that book was an edited volume looking at Australasia, looking at the US, North America, looking at the Far East, looking at the Middle East and Europe. We found that basically across the globe, many workers who could, because not everybody can work flexibly.
Yeah.
If you're a nurse or a doctor, you have to work in a hospital. You're a bus driver. You're a pilot. You have no option. But for those who can, and given that we have so many service-based economies in the globe, they wanted to work substantially from home, but go into a central office from time to time.
Mhm.
That's what my book found globally.
Mm,
What this has done is it's actioned it. Now people can
mhm.
do it, and they can be effective, but they don't want to work 100% remotely. And that's the
Mhm.
other bit the research found pre-COVID, is although people wanted to work flexibly, they didn't want to work 100% from home.
Right.
They wanted to be given, because people need control and autonomy over their jobs. They perform better, they get less ill, they're more job satisfied. So now it can be done.
Mhm.
And now employers want to do it because employers want to downsize their estate. In other words, the rental properties they have to have in big cities. So because they can't, because we're going into a very bad recession now,
Right.
worse than the recession we had in 2008 because of COVID.
Mm,
So the employer now wants to do it. The employees want to do it. They didn't do it before because they were worried that it would show lack of commitment to the employer if they opted for a flexible working option. So
mm,
this reset button of COVID has been fantastic from that point of view. Second thing is people begin to appreciate in the workplace good management. People who manage people by praise and reward rather. So good bosses, good line managers from shop floor to top floor are now essential in the new world of work. And the new world of
mm,
work will be flexible working, will be a world in which we need line managers who have emotional intelligence,
mhm.
who have social interpersonal skills, because they're going to have to manage people remotely. They're going to have to manage people who may not be coping because there's going to be fewer people in the work environment as a result of the recession. They're going to be doing more work. They're going to be showing more face time. They're going to be being definitely job insecure. They're going to be very worried
Right.
about their job going forward. Therefore, we
Mm,
need a socially and emotionally literate line manager from shop floor to top floor. So that's going to change. So managers no longer in the workplace are going to be promoted based almost on their technical skills, mostly on their technical skills. There's going to have to be parity between their people skills and their technical skills. They're going to just have to be more socially intelligent and emotionally intelligent. So that's going to be a big change. And I think there's going to be a lot going now for more diversity, more women moving up the hierarchy, because women have more EQ than men on balance, the research evidence shows. So we're going to get more women and more ethnic minorities. I think more diversity will help organizations in the future too, to cope with the kind of challenges rather than, the white male at the top of the organization. That I think will change, because we do need diversity, not only of ethnicity and gender, but we need it of life experience, people who do different kinds of jobs on the top of organizations. And so I think that's going to be another challenge. But we do need to create well-being environments. And the reason we need to change it is because employers want to retain the Z generation and the millennials. They're not going to be able to do that unless they create the right cultures. And if you think about it, the Z generation, I mean, the millennials, are the people everybody's been calling snowflakes. Oh man, they're not that interested. They go into a job, they last a year, and they take off. But what we have learned from the millennials is the reason they take off is they don't like the culture that they're operating in. And unlike their parents who tolerated it to pay the mortgage, the newer generations, the Z generation, the millennials, will leave a work environment that's not a good place to work.
Definitely.
So good work becomes really important. And a well-being culture is now fundamental to the success of organizations, to retain people, to get good productivity out of them, and to reduce the sickness related rates, which now across the globe in developed countries is in most developed countries, the leading cause of sickness absence. In the UK, 57% of all long-term sickness absence last year was due to stress, anxiety, and depression. 57%. It's the biggest single cause.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for this grand opening that, not only answered my question, but gave us already a snapshot into the future. So that's awesome. Yeah, I love that.
But I think what we need to do is just now focus in on making the workplace a kind of place people want to go to work in, feel motivated by it, feel valued, recognized. We haven't had that before. We've had line managers who don't know how to do that because they don't have as much EQ as they need. So I think we're going to get a change now. A reboot is in order. And I think this has led to this, fortunately, I think COVID has led to it. Whether other people having reflection time over these 8 or 9 months to think about what we really need.
100%. I'm with you on that. And it's definitely a huge opportunity for all of us to kind of rethink, everything we've been doing. So thank you for expressing these things. There's so much that, I picked up from what you were talking about. And so I'm going to try and keep the structure. And I guess the first thing that I think would be really good to define is, when you talk about this idea of well-being and a healthy, well-functioning workplace that people want to go to, what does that even look like? Could you define, what it looks like? What is it like for an organization to actually be healthy in that sense?
Okay, I'll tell you what I think it looks like. I think it looks like, and do remember when we're talking about well-being, we're no one size fits every organization. Every organization is different. So what it might look in a public sector body, like a government department, would be different than it would look like in a Shell Oil, right? It would be a different culture. And even within Shell, there'd be different mini cultures. There'd be Shell India, Shell, UK, Shell, wherever. And those are going to have different kind of cultures that are well-being. But there are certain fundamentals, like one fundamental, I think, is that that people trust that your line manager whoever that is manages you by praise and reward rather than fault finding, recognizes you when you do a good job. So part of a culture is when I go to work, the people I'm relating to most are my colleagues and my boss. And if my boss values what I do and gives me autonomy to do it, that's great. So I think that's part of it. Job security is part of it too, that the organization itself attempts as much as it can to provide a certain amount of security for people, to make them feel that, you know, that they have a sustainable future here. And that helps people too. Now, we can't always do that because you do have to keep, employers do have to keep labor costs down from time to time. But that they create the right kind of culture which makes people feel, well, I'm reasonably secure here. They really value me. They trust me. Another part of that is the trust element can be reflected in different ways. So if people want to work flexibly, they're allowed to. They don't always have to be in the office. They can work from home substantially, come in from time to time, as long as they get their job done. That they feel, the individual feels, hey, this organization trusts me. They don't think I'm just going to go on and have coffee mornings if I'm working from home. That I am actually delivering to the bottom line. And I will, because you trust me to do that. That it's not a long hours culture. That people aren't getting emails at night and every night and at weekends and when they're on holiday. That's a part of it too. Because what's happened over recent years pre-COVID is that emails have been causing enormous stress. There's a whole new field called techno stress. There's countries like France which have a right to disconnect law. The law says in France, no manager can send an email out of office hours to their subordinates. That means at night, at weekends, or while they're on holiday. Now, I don't like that because I like the principle of that. But what I don't like is that if we want people to work flexibly, sometimes families will, you know, a working mom will have to take the kids to school or pick them up from school and work with them and then want to work at night. So if you do, like some companies are doing, I think Volkswagen has this thing where they actually block a person's email at 5 o'clock. This is their headquarters, and then turn it on the next morning. I like the principle of it. It's sending a message, hey, don't send emails to people's out of office hours. You're damaging their private life. But I also want flexibility. So another thing would be, you know, kind of mandating to, again, managers to say, listen, people need a private life. They need downtime. So please, unless you really need to, don't send them an email at night, at weekends, or while they're on holiday. Just don't do it. You sometimes need to, and they'll understand that. That's fine, occasionally. But if you do it regularly, that's not acceptable. That's part of a culture. But every culture is different. Some organizations want to feature on 2 or 3 different aspects. In other words, this is a strategic issue. And this is, every organization ought to have a chief well-being officer. This is somebody whose job it is to look after the health and well-being, because HR kind of does that, and in some organizations they do more of that than other organizations. But they also are pay and rations. They do things like hiring and firing and salaries and promotions and things like that. And I think we need people at a senior level whose role it is to look after the health and well-being of all the whole organization, and to ensure that we have a well-being culture. There are more and more companies appointing directors of health and well-being. At least in the UK, there are quite a lot now.
That's brilliant.
And the move is moving in the direction of seeing this as a strategic bottom line issue, not an issue that, you know, that it's not about ping pong tables, bean bags, you know, mindfulness at lunch. That's not what well-being's about. They're fun. I like doing that. I like doing mindfulness. I quite like massages at your desk. But to be honest with you, that's not well-being. Well-being is the living culture. Is it a culture that really values human beings? Does it recognize them? Does it trust them? That's what it's about. And every organization needs to see this as a strategic issue.
Beautiful. Yeah, you're touching on so much stuff there, which I just see the overlaps with, where burnout comes in and the reasons why people burn out, because it's obviously not,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's not about too much.
Well, burnout occurs, Veronica, if you think about it, when people consistently work long hours.
Mm,
They have work unsocial hours, people contacting them at weekends, when they're on holiday, at night, when they're given unmanageable workloads,
mm,
unrealistic deadlines. All of those are symptoms of, are the causes of burnout. In the
mm,
end, people can't cope with the overload. The
mm.
overload can be electronic through emails. It can be in just their workload itself, their in tray.
Yeah.
It could be in the expectations of when they're expected to complete things. It's
Mm,
all of that. And if all of those are hitting somebody, then ultimately
mm,
they will burn out, or
mm.
they'll just pick up and leave. And with
Yeah.
the good news is the millennials and the younger generation just bugger off, as the
Mm.
British, they leave because they don't want, they won't take it like
Mm,
the older generation did. They'll
mm,
take off and look for another employer.
mm,
But burnout is heavy. Stress-related illness is heavy.
mm.
In the UK, 57% of all long-term sickness absence is
Yeah.
due to stress,
Yeah.
depression,
Yeah.
and burnout.
Yeah. I what
It's
I
big.
what I find really fascinating in what you were talking about is that, well, burnout is so much broader than just too much stress, and so many of those things that you mentioned, lack of control, the absence of community in a workplace, having unfair treatment, the lack of reward, all of these things actually do contribute to burnout. And for me, like, what I really want to ask you is that there's obviously, an individual that comes to the workplace and has certain behaviors, certain habits, certain patterns, basically the whole toolkit that we operate from as a person, and a lot of traumas and stuff like that. So we come into this like collective, the organization that also has some kind of a setup. And there tends to be a conversation between what causes the burnout. Like, is it, how should it be cured? Is it on the organizational level, on the systemic level, or is it with the individual? Because if we
Well,
have
it's a bit of both. Veronica, it's a bit of both. I
mm,
mean, some people are more prone to stress than others. Just a little bit
mm,
of, just a bit of organizational pressure on you in your workplace produces an adverse reaction in you. Other
mm,
people are more resilient. They have a stronger sense of purpose, are more adaptable, they can cope better with it.
mm,
We've seen that during this pandemic. Some people have coped well working for 7 or 8 months primarily from home,
mm.
and other people have had trouble within a month of dealing with it and
Yeah.
not being around other people and so on. So it is partly your coping strategies as a person, your
Mm,
resilience as a person, and, and of course how you deal with pressure when it hits. And the other bit of it, of the dynamic, is all the things that are hitting you, like lack of control at work, like a long hours culture, like an abusive management style,
mm,
like an inability to work flexibly. Your employer doesn't want you to work from home
yeah.
ever, et cetera, et cetera. So all of those factors we call, in my trade, called stressors.
Hmm.
Those stressors to the individual, and depending on what your coping strategies are like and your resilience levels, will determine when you burn out or when you suffer from anxiety or depression.
Mm,
Um, and that difference, that we're all different. So but a good line manager would be somebody who says, Veronica, I think I don't think her coping strategies are terrible, but she's not a very resilient person.
mhm.
Therefore, I have to watch out what I give her. I have to think about giving her a manageable workload, a realistic deadline, just to make sure that we don't dump on her quick, because I'm not sure she can cope. Yet, Jack over there, he is much more resilient. I can give him a lot more work
Mm,
because I think he can tolerate it, but only up to a certain level, because we can only all tolerate things up to a
mm.
certain level. So a good line manager who has emotional intelligence and social skills will know what to give, how much to give, and and have realistic deadlines on projects to you versus Jack, and would know how to do that and would balance it. And somebody who's has emotional deficits as a boss won't do that, and just listen, Veronica, just bloody do that. If you don't, have you read your contract? I want you to do that. Or Jack, dump.
Yeah. There's something I see there's something I find really tricky with this, because what you described is exactly where I was. I burnt out, and I was in this situation. So one of the traits of people who have a tendency to burn out is actually this like really strong need to prove themselves. So even though I'm not really able to manage that workload, I pretend that I can, so I can match, the peer pressures there. And on the surface, I look like I'm fine. And so they do dump a lot of work on me, and I do perform, but it's not really sustainable. So how can the managers know that this is, that this is what's happening?
Well, that's the problem. The problem is we need emotional conversations. We need people to tell. It's not, if they don't know you're not coping and you're feeling that and you just can't deal with it, but you're bottling it up and you're pretending that you can, then it's the manager's fault in a way. I mean, it is. They should recognize that you're not coping, because there's other ways of recognizing it without you saying anything. It's body language. It's your facial expressions. It's a whole load of factors should say to me, if I was the manager, Veronica's just not coping. She's not saying she's not coping, but I'm seeing in everything about her, physical appearance, her eye contact, when she gets in, when she leaves, all these things, that she's just not coping well. But in any case, you should be able to tell your boss that, you know what, Fred, I just can't. You're asking me to deliver that, and here's what you've done. You've given me 3, and you do it in a nice way. You don't do it in a really defensive way. You've given me 3 jobs to do, and by doing it by Monday morning, I just can't do it. I really can't achieve that. I can do that one and that one. Can we organize so I can do the other one maybe Wednesday or Thursday? But that you have to open up, and you have to say, I'm just finding it difficult. Like, it's unrealistic, that deadline you gave me. Really, just can't. But I'll tell you when I can do it. So rather than complain, you're giving them the option. Here's when I can. But if you don't have that conversation, then you bury it, and then you get ill.
Definitely. Yeah. It feels a little bit like chicken and egg, because now, that I work with clients who are going through burnout, it's not always easy to have a manager they can open up to and they trust, because they feel the pressure of having to say yes to everything. And, like burnout profile also comes with lots of things like people pleasing, conflict avoidance, and, all of these things where it makes it really hard for that person to actually be able to do that. So it puts them in this position where they just feel like they have to say yes to everything. So yeah, it's not really.
Yeah, I know. But that's why we need a different kind of line manager. That's why if we don't get that, we're not going to go any further. Because there will be some people, if you give them feedback and say, listen, Fred, you've given me those 3 jobs too. Would you mind if I did those 2 jobs first and then do it? Because I don't think I can deliver everything on the Monday. There'll be some who there'll be a number who will say that sounds pretty reasonable to me, and there'll be others say, no, I'm expecting it by Monday. Those are the wrong kind of people to have it. They shouldn't have given you 3 to do by Monday anyway.
Yeah. It just feels like there's so much pressure, so much pressure on companies, like altogether. Is there a way that the management and the leadership can actually walk the talk and kind of, model that behavior so that people feel?
I think they can. I mean, everybody now knows, all the people in occupational health and HR know now that we have to change the line manager. We got to get a different type. We got to get one parity between their emotional skills, stroke people skills, and their technical skills. Until we get that, we're going to be in trouble, because the majority still are promoted based on their technical skills and technical competence. not their people skills.
Mm.
You get a job because you're delivering the bottom line. You push people around, you're command and control, and you get it done. And that it looks good, but you burn people out along the way by doing that.
Mm.
That's what they don't see when they recruit you. They don't see the fallout of that behavior.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm also curious about, when you talked about autonomy and the control that every single individual needs to have in order to feel, that they can really do the job on their own terms, and we're becoming this a lot more evolved kind of workforce altogether. In terms of development and, the kind of like the place of an individual in an organization, what do you think could be potentially done for people to, take ownership of their own state of being rather than just wait for the management to pick up on these things? Like, is there an opportunity?
I think they can. I think you're right. Look at it, it's a two-way street. The manager has to be more responsive and socially skilled, but the individual themselves has to communicate well.
Right.
And pretty resilient themselves by saying, but you don't do it in an aggressive way, attacking your manager, but you do it by opening up a conversation. You have to be socially skilled enough to know how to do it too, and say, hey, listen, friend, finish that job then and that job then. But you know what? The best thing to do is to come up with solutions to problems rather than another. Say to your boss, I do it by Monday.
Right.
That doesn't help the boss.
No.
What helps the boss is when you say, I've looked at my schedule and all the demands on me. I can do those two things by Monday, but I can't do the third one. But it's, in my view, it's the least priority. The other two I'll do, and I'll do that on Wednesday or Thursday. And that's the way you do it. You don't come with a solution. You create problems for the boss, and then your relationship with that manager gets damaged.
Yeah, that really makes sense. Thank you. Yeah, this is all really good stuff. I'm wondering if there's anything that we haven't covered that I'm really curious about.
You can always call me some other time, Veronica. Don't worry.
Yeah. What do you have you come across burnout much this year? Is it like more frequent? Is it more prominent than in the past years? Have you seen an uptake in that? Are you like? I'm really curious about that.
Your sound went for the minute. Go ahead, Veronica. Say it again.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, if you have, what's currently your awareness of burnout in organizations and just generally being, out there, and if particularly this year you've seen more of it. And I'm also interested in, people working from home and how that has been impacting their well-being, because you talked about some of these things where it's like, good to work from our own place, but at the same time, we know that it's been really heavy year in terms of the pressures on the mental health. So if I'm wondering if there's more.
Well, let me tell you something which is interesting this year. So we had a dreadful year. We've had the virus, the pandemic, and all the rest of it. And we're going to have not a terribly good year following because of the recession. Next couple of years aren't going to be very good. And in the UK, of course, Brexit's going to cause its own problems. So anyway, that's not good news. Any of those are not good news. However, guess what? Well-being is big time. So my University of Manchester spin-off company, Robertson, we're booming. Everybody's coming to us, help. Because you know why? They're going to have fewer people. They're going to be doing more work. They're going to be showing more face time. They're going to be job insecure. They're worried to death about the future. They're going to be working longer hours, and they're going to burn themselves out. And organizations now want a strategic approach to this. How do we cope with a reduced workforce doing a lot of work? And we need help to figure out how to do this. So to be honest with you, and that happened the last time to my University of Manchester spin-off company, Robertson Cooper. In 2008, we got lots of work in 2009 and 2010 for the same reason. This time, we're getting even more work because it's not about the pandemic, it's about the recession. And this recession is going to be quite bad. So everybody wants to retain good people, right? Their worry is talent retention. We don't want to burn them out. We're now mean and lean. We don't have any fat whatsoever in our talent pool. We're mean and lean. We want to retain it. Anybody we lose is going to be is going to affect our business. Every person now counts. So therefore, how do we retain them? And the way you retain them is by getting the kind of a well-being culture going.
Brilliant. The thing that you just mentioned about, you know, having less people, but being able to sustain the amount of work that we do in a company. I can see a lot of companies having, you know, struggling with that, because there is obviously the workload, which is almost a static kind of thing, you know, it just keeps coming in. And how do you cope with that if you have less people without, you know, while implementing these best practices? What is your, like, if a company comes to you, like, you know, with a problem like this, what's the go-to? Like, how do you help them solve this thing with, like, okay, this is like your best people to keep. How are you going to approach it? Like, do you create longer timelines?
Companies don't come to us. No, companies don't come to us like that. Companies come and they'll say, do a well-being audit. We get employees to fill in our instrument asset. We do it online. We can tell them within a week. We can break it down demographically, men, women, that department, that small little subsection against that. We can look at it really quickly and do a diagnosis and say, the problem you have over there is a long hours culture. The problem you have over there is a bullying management style.
Right.
The problem you have over there is glass ceiling for women. The problem you have there is people being given emails at all hours of the day and night. So we can identify absolutely quickly what the problems are. It's not, and it's coming to employee voice. They're telling us, we're aggregating the data, we give it to them.
That's awesome.
And then we say, in that part of the department, you got to do that to reduce the glass ceiling for women. That one has a long hours culture and it's causing people to get ill and you're burning them out. In that part, you have a bullying management style and you got to change it.
Brilliant. That makes me so happy that culture is becoming, you know, we had it coming when it's actually getting to the forefront of the company's sort of strategic goals.
No, it is now a strategic issue. It's a strategic issue. I'm afraid, Veronica, I have to go now, but I can see you some other time.
This is amazing. Thank you so much. Like, this gave me a really good overview of, you know, like where you at and the ways you're helping others, and also, some of the trends that you see coming up. So if anything, I will reach out to you again. Thank you so much, Cary. This has been awesome.
Anytime, reach out to me. There's no problem. We can do it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. You too. Enjoy the sun.